Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 750. I had the white pieces and started off with knight f3. Opponent played c5. I went g3, going for the Reti setup. He went e6, so he's building up a big center. Let's see, I continue with bishop g2. If we back up for a second, against this setup, there's lots of different possible continuations. Let's back up even further. The very first move, knight f6, a kind of waiting move, is the most common choice, followed by d5 and then c5. So we're in very respectable grounds here. And then after g3, this e6 move is kind of rare. The main moves are bringing the knight out. Let's see, the other knight first, knight c6, most popular, also d5, building up a big center immediately. I mean, e6 to prepare d5 is not really necessary, and it does limit what you can do with the light squared bishop, or g6 going for symmetrical fianchetto. And at this point I could go with a symmetrical English after this, but I just continue with the Reti setup. But anytime I throw in c4, I've kind of switched into a symmetrical English until black plays d5, then it's really something else with this e6 d5 setup. So I went c4 here anyway. I mean, this is one of the ideas of the Reti, is to get some pressure along the light squared diagonal. And the main move here is knight to f6, just supporting the center. Let's see, did I take a look at this line? No, not really. But I mean, that's a logical move. He went knight to e7. And then, here there's some alternatives, but we're pretty much out of the book at this point. I just went with b3, but d4 is also, well, it's a top engine choice, but another kind of a consistent way to play with the Reti setup would be to take on d5, just trade off your c pawn for your opponent's d pawn, and I think knight takes is the recommended reply here, and you still have ideas of playing on this diagonal. So that would be fine too, but cancel that. Anyway, I went with b3 here and setting up a counter fianchetto. This should be okay as well, d4. All these positions, by the way, the chess engine rates as in the range of about even. So with the Reti setup, you're going for more of a long-term game. You rarely get an opening advantage unless your opponent makes some mistake. Let's see, castles, knight b to c6, pretty normal developing moves, d3. I decided I wanted to block that pawn first. Also, open up a diagonal for this bishop in case it finds something useful on that diagonal. And then I also want to prepare e3 to undermine the center. Let's see, he played g6 here, and I went e3. And I was curious if this timing was right, but the chess engine had the e3 as the top choice there. You can go ahead and play that now and try and soften up the center before you complete the development of the queen side pieces. So bishop g7, supporting the center, is pretty logical, and also sets up some traps here. I mean, I kind of wanted to take right away, but that's a losing move, and I fortunately spotted that it was a problem. Although I didn't have the sequence exactly right. It's best for black to take with the knight, and then there's lots of threats here. The chief is knight takes knight with check, and then bishop takes the rook in the corner, winning a whole rook. So the only move that doesn't lose big material is knight to e1, and you still lose the exchange after a move like knight to b3. Knight takes b3. You take the knight back, and then he picks up the rook. So that's pretty good. That's and then that's the best that white can do after taking on d4. So definitely you don't want to take in this situation. But bishop b2. Getting a piece on that diagonal, countering some of these threats. Now if he takes, his bishop is loose too, so he's not going to take. He just castles, which also defends his bishop, and now I can take on d4. And he could have taken back with a pawn right away, but that would kind of block in his bishop, so we went for taking with pieces. And it just seems to make sense here to trade the pieces off. It doesn't seem to be anything better for white in that position. And this queen takes d4 is a good idea. It keeps my pawn backwards, so he doesn't want to end up with a pawn on d4. I guess that's the reason why black is playing this way. He wants to keep this d3 pawn as a backwards pawn as a weakness that he can play against. So I need to find a way to develop my knight. I got knight a3, and this is all okay. It also defends the rook and gets my knight into the game. Let's see. Yeah, the engine said actually I could have played knight d2 and let him have that pawn. I guess that's okay for me as well. But knight a3 keeps some material. He goes rook d8, and for a second I was worried about this pawn, and then I realized there's actually a problem on the d file after queen f3. And if he takes, then rook to d1, and he's actually losing the rook. This rook on the back rank is undefended, so it's a little bit of a surprising tactic and can catch some people unawares. But he was paying attention at this point during the game. He didn't fall for that. Although the chess engine says he could have tried queen to b2. That would have been a very interesting try because it's hitting my my loose knight here. And in fact, there's only one square the knight can go to. It can't be defended, it has to move, and the only square it can go to is knight to b5. So it forced me into some contortions here. He can kick the knight, and the knight has no move, so I have to chase the queen away. I have to bring the other rook over to the queen side. And then after the queen goes back, it could go back to, I think, either d5, e5 or back to g7. Then the knight comes back to a3, and I slowly unravel. It's still about even, but that would have been maybe a way for black to try for something. Let's see, he went rook b8. I went rook a to d1. Rook a to d1 was really unnecessary. Chess engine says I should just go knight b5 right away, chase his queen off of that good square. So I get knight b5 then with tempo. Yeah, because as I just showed, he can't actually take that pawn, so rook a to d1 is pretty unnecessary at this point, although it might be useful later. So kind of a slow move. Let's see, and he goes a6, taking away this knight b5 idea, so I have to bring my knight to c2. He could have tried. There was another idea for black here. Instead of a6, could have tried bishop to d7. This is probably better, you know, finish his development, get his rooks connected, and looks like he's pretty good here. Knight to c2, kicking the queen. The queen can then come into b2, which happened later in the game. Rook to d2, defending the knight, and then bishop to c6, chasing my queen away and trading off my bishop. And that looks like that is fine for black, so maybe a little better than what he played. a6, I get a tempo with my knight, get my knight back into the game, and then he goes in with queen b2. So queen b2 is not yet a fatal mistake, but the engine does prefer actually queen to c3. You know, it's still hitting my knight, and maybe it's got some more ideas from that square. It gives this line, queen to f4, which is a tempo move hitting the rook on b8. Let's see, bishop d7, developing the bishop, connecting the rooks, and then knight to e3. And it thinks that's still maybe a little better for black. So interesting play. Queen b2 is kind of misplacing the queen, but as I said, it's not fatal. I go knight e3, and then he goes queen takes e2, and that is queen takes a2, just grabbing that pawn, and that is actually the losing move. The chess engine thinks the best move here is queen d4, or also queen to g7. Just bring the queen back. It's not doing much on b2 anymore, and taking on a2 like he did is actually losing. Although I didn't play in the best way, as you may have come to expect. So the immediate queen f6, I can play queen f6 right now. I didn't recognize this idea, but queen f6 right here is really good because it hits this knight, which is undefended. So the immediate queen f6 is the way to punish this queen takes a2 idea. Let's see, if he tries, say, rook to e8, defending the knight. I was looking at how this might go. It's kind of similar to the game. Knight to g5, knight up to f5, and then queen to e5. Another point is that, well, I hit this rook with tempo. Bishop comes in here, and then the knight can come into f6 with check. So my pieces are all kind of swarming in, and this actually wins the bishop. So there are other lines there, of course, but the main idea is I can play the immediate queen f6 with a tempo. So that would be best play there. I played rook b1. This still keeps his queen a little bit out of play and keeps an advantage to white, but it's not that immediate kill, and he can survive this if he plays okay. Let's see, I play knight g4 here. Now I'm starting to get the idea. Knight g4 is definitely the best move here. Yeah, maybe bishop d7 wasn't entirely accurate, because after knight g4, once again, I've got an advantage, which is getting close to winning. Well, maybe rook b1 kept a slight, or almost a nearly winning advantage, and knight g4 is a good follow-up. Let's see, he went bishop e8. I guess bishop e8 is where he starts to get into trouble. Again, that was the advantage for white keeps climbing as you look at the chess engine through this section. After that, I recognize that I can put my queen on f6, and I should do it now before he gets in king to g7. I mean, it'd be nice to get the knight there and the queen there, but you have to do it in the right order. After knight there, he can play king to g7 and keep control of that square. So you play the queen there first. He goes with knight f5 now, and I can't go with knight to h6, unfortunately. But queen to e5 is a good move. That's the chess engine's recommended move. Queen to e5, and he seems kind of tied up. I guess I should have looked at what happens if he tries to bring the queen back. But anyway, the chess engine was just giving b6 here, kind of a nothing move. It's a sign it doesn't find anything. Knight to f6 check, king to f8, and I can grab this pawn. If he goes the other way, I can grab the bishop. Let's see, it would continue. King back to g8, knight back, king f8, and then knight to g4, king g8, and finally bishop to e4, bringing more material. You do need more force to make this attack work, but it turns out to be important to go through that sequence and get rid of the h-pawn, because the way he had of handling it, so let's see, he went knight f5, I went bishop e4 immediately, and he could have immediately played h5 here, and then that forces me to move the knight, say knight to e5, and it seems like black can hang on in this position, so I would still be pressing the attack, maybe pushing the pawns like that, drive that knight away. So I think it's not so easy for black, but well, according to the chess engine, he can actually defend that position after bishop to e4. But he had to play h5 immediately. He played knight to g7, and now I'm looking pretty good again. I come in knight h6 check, king to f8, and then g4. g4 actually is a little bit slow. Once again, the chess engine wants me to go queen e5, even though there's no tempo on the rook. It's just maybe it's doing a little more there. After queen e5, once again something like b6, knight to g4. He just wants to reroute this knight to the f6 square as the way to continue the attack there. Anyway, I played g4. That keeps his knight from hopping into these squares. And he could now, at this point, once again, I've been a little bit too slow in the attack. He could start to bring his queen back. So the way he could survive from this point would be something like this. Queen a5. See, I push on with h4. That was my idea, h4, h5, and take advantage of the pins over here and the bishop on the g6. But it's his move. He gets queen c7. I get h5, and he gets queen e7. So it takes him 3 moves to get back, but it takes me 3 moves to get my pawns forward. So that plan of just pushing those pawns and taking advantage of the weakness on this diagonal after exchanging on g6 is too slow. So anyway, that's why this g4 move was not so great, although there were other ways to play. But anyway, he blunders with bishop to c6, which is kind of funny because I sat and stared at the position for a long time without playing queen to f7, the obvious reply there. I guess it's one of those moves that's so unexpected. Bishop f6 is a move that's so unexpected that you're stunned. But anyway, he played it, and I took the bishop, and then he resigned because even in this position, there's actually a forced mate. There's no way he can protect the f7 square, and his king has got nowhere to run to. And everywhere he goes, he gets mated. So anyway, that was an interesting game and had a cute finish. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.